Perfect. A tutorial about stabilization, that doesn't sound very necessary, but I assure you it is, because the technique I'm about to show you is significantly faster than any other method you probably used in Blender, where you're probably tracking 1 to 2 points so you can stabilize for location, rotation, and scale. No, we're not going to be doing anything with point trackers. In fact, we're not even going to be using Blender for this tutorial, but we are still going to be using free software. Davinci Resolve, the free version, is what you're going to need to do this, but believe me, it's worth it once you see how fast and how good the results are for like zero work. So here we have Davinci Resolve open. I'm not assuming that you know how this program works. I'm just going to take you through it in the easiest way possible. I have the editing workspace open. I mean, I don't think they call them workspaces here, but whatever. We're going to use Blender lingo, and we have our footage imported, and all we need to do is start a timeline by bringing this down, which will create a timeline, and we don't necessarily need the audio track. You can see that right now we just have this video that has a bunch of location, rotation, and maybe a tiny bit of scale variation. Notice that at no point do we really have any kind of change in perspective here. This is kind of as if I'm holding the camera but just shaking it a bit, and that is very important because the technique I'm about to show you assumes that there is no changes in perspective, so make sure your camera's kind of locked in. So once you have your footage imported, we are just going to select this clip and go into Fusion, which is built into Davinci Resolve. This is the node editor, and you can see that pretty much what is going on here is we have the footage right here, and it's going to what is being outputted. So if we play this, we just have the footage. If we select this node and hit Shift spacebar, which is to say add another node connected to the one selected, and type in Planar Tracker, we can add in a Planar Tracker, which is different from a point tracker because we are going to be tracking a surface instead of just a single point, so that is why it's a Planar Tracker. With this Planar Tracker, we can actually define any surface that it is we want to track. So for example, we could draw in a little mask just by clicking, and then we could track something like this just by tracking forwards, and you can see that it tracks the surface. However, since this footage again has no changes in perspective, you can think of the whole shot as one big surface. Normally you wouldn't be able to do this, but since there are no changes in perspective, we can kind of get away with it. It wouldn't be perfectly accurate, but we're just going to do it anyway. So with the Planar Tracker node selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mask over pretty much the entirety of the frame. Again, normally I would not recommend doing this since surfaces move independently of each other if there's a bit of perspective warping, but since we don't have that, this is fine. We are going to track forwards, which is going to track our shot pretty well, and you can see that already this is significantly faster than doing anything with point trackers, because once we have our track pretty much locked in, all we have to do is change this track mode to steady, not stabilized, but steady, and you can see that this stabilizes very, very effectively. Notice that it actually does the location, rotation, and scale all in one go, and right now it's using the first frame as our frame to be the reference frame, so this is what's taking up the whole frame. If you wanted something like frame 50 to be that frame, all you have to do is go to that frame, click set, and then it's going to make this one the steady frame, and it's still going to do our stabilization. And by the way, this is just a bit of a bonus if you don't want everything locked in as if it's perfectly stabilized, but instead you just want the camera motion to be smoothed a bit, so kind of like a smoothing, a stabilization, but not a steadying. All you do is you change this steady over to stabilize, where you can say how many frames forwards and backwards should you compute. So right now we're going to do something like 30, but let's bring it down just so it stabilizes but doesn't look locked in. We're going to compute our stabilization, and now when we play this, you can see that the camera motion has been smoothed a bit, but it's not perfectly stable. So I thought this would be something kind of useful to talk about since, you know, it's faster than the Blender point tracker and Davinci Resolve is free, so why not stabilize using this method? Well, whatever. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I hope you learned something. If you want to support this channel, Patreon exists. You get a whole bunch of stuff there, so check it out. Let me ask you a question. Are you tired of making plants and trees and vegetation of all kinds by hand, especially considering that this is one of the hardest things to make look photorealistic in 3D because you need to make all the leaves and thorns, and depending on what you're making, you're gonna have all kinds of different challenges? Well, this is not something that you are supposed to make by hand, especially on a large scale, which is why you should consider the Blender add-on Botanique to kind of outsource all that work so you never have to think about it again. Botanique is essentially a very, very large asset library of trees, plants, basically any kind of vegetation. You got flowers, grass, cacti, that all you have to do is just select which one you want, click import, and now you have it in your scene. It looks real. You throw an HDRI and you don't need to do any work beyond that. And on top of Botanique being this absolutely massive asset library that I use myself because I'm never making a tree or anything like that again, it also has a couple features that are fairly useful, like snapping to ground, so you can snap your vegetation to the terrain, randomize transform so that you don't have an exact clone of the same thing over and over and over again. You want to randomize rotation, scale, location, all these things. And the newer version of Botanique, which I think right now is 6.0 unless they update by the time time this video comes out, it has this feature that basically lets you make grass and weeds without messing with a particle system. It's super intuitive, and you just do some weight painting to say where you want grass, where you don't want grass. It has all these features combined into a single add-on that will make it so that you never have to mess with vegetation again, which is important because it is impossible to make this kind of stuff look real. If you are interested in getting this for yourself, I put a link in the description where you can get that add-on. It is an affiliate's link, full disclosure, meaning that you pay the same thing as you would otherwise, but I just get a small cut of any sale made through that link, which is good if you want to get the add-on anyways and you just want some of that revenue to go my way, which is, you know, it's a thing you can do. Anyways, Botanique really is a powerful add-on. I actually use it myself, and I'm just going to keep advocating for it because it is one of the best things on the Blender market. Stop making vegetation yourself. You're wasting your time. Get this add-on. It will take your workflow to the next dimensions. You don't want to be wasting time on this nonsense.